is similar but slightly different than the PowerPoint presentation that we had for the PZC public hearing. And just as an overview, we were going to walk through. There's some changes, some differences from the other PowerPoint. We've scaled it back a little bit, but then we've also added in some things. But nothing we've added in is anything that you haven't seen already that was in your packet. We've taken portions of the letter that I sent you, and we've now incorporated that into the PowerPoint in case people in the audience have not yet seen the agenda packet and had an opportunity to hear our responses to some of the comments that were made at the public hearing. So again, just as an overview, Sarah's going to talk a little bit about the academy, the property, and all that, and then I'm going to address some of those public comments that we talked about, or that we heard at the Plan Commission, and at that public hearing at the end. It was a very long night, and at the end, we did not respond to any of those public comments. So as you saw in my letter, I selected a couple of high-level observations and comments of neighbors that are concerned about this proposal, and we certainly understand those concerns and appreciate them. And then at the end of this presentation, we have some, I've summarized some conditions of approval. As you know, under your zoning ordinance, there's a provision that talks about how to assess, how to handle special use applications, and in those provisions, it says one of the things that the Planning and Zoning Commission can recommend and the village board can do to address concerns is establish conditions of approval. So we have summarized at the end of this presentation those conditions of approval. So at that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Sarah.
Turn the mic on. Is it on? Thank you, James. Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Hal. And thank you to each of our trustees, our village president. I appreciate the time and consideration, think tank that you are in consideration of our application. So we've been in a few of these, and I know there's been a lot of information, so I'll try to keep this brief for who we are. I'm Sarah Elliott. I am the executive director for Headwaters Academy. I grew up in Campton Hills, went to Wasco School, Pearson Creek, on Briarwood Drive, where my parents Dan and Sally still live. They're coming up on 50 years at that location, so we've been part of this community a very long time. I spent some years away, living in other states and abroad, and came back here, met my husband, stayed on to raise my own family in Campton Hills. From 2020 until this spring, I was working for the USDA, the Food and Nutrition Services, on farm-to-school programming in the Midwest region. It covers 7 states in the Midwest, so think serving local food in school lunchrooms, teaching kids about nutrition education in classrooms, and learning to garden in their communities. And so this was at a, we supported the states to do this statewide initiatives. We supported it through grant work, and I spent 5 years with USDA colleagues really learning how these systems functioned. When the current administration changed and reduced the workforce size, my job went with it. It has allowed me to bring this knowledge set with me to this role. To be clear, I am a volunteer. I do not get paid to be an executive director. This is a passion project. This is what I want to be doing. We are a fledgling organization, and we are working to create a school that meets the needs of kids, emphasizes nature, as well as farm and food literacy. When we talk about raising the next generation, we talk about educating students about how food grows, where it comes from, and so they can make better decisions for their own health and lives, and potentially engage in careers in agriculture. So while we've been going through this zoning process, we have found a temporary location at Wesley United Methodist in Aurora. We are renting 2 classrooms from them, and we've really been received with open arms. Very grateful for their willingness to host us. We have 2 teachers under contract and 18 enrolled students. Okay, grades K to 8. So nearing 100 years old. The classrooms are on the third floor. There is no elevator and there is no central air conditioning. It's 30 minutes from Campton Hills, and you may be able to see why this is not a long-term solution for our students. Very warm in there. We are still enrolling students, but our total enrollment is likely going to sit around 18 and or not exceed 20 this year. We've had 2 very part-time contractors while we've been in this startup phase. Everyone else you've met in our organization is a volunteer. Other than our teachers, I'll get to that part. While we are starting our school September 2nd in our temporary space, we will also be working on our community garden. The garden will be for the community of Headwater students and families. Since the beginning, Friday has always been targeted as a day of field trips. Learning out and about in the community instead of in classrooms. Because we cannot incorporate nature farm education Monday through Thursday, we plan to visit forest preserves, parks, and our community garden on Fridays. There will be a schedule. As community gardens are allowed on RE2 properties, we will be in compliance with zoning regulations. We also offer not to start those field trips until this has passed a vote and all zoning questions are resolved. We also plan to use the restrooms located inside the existing principal structure on the property when needed, or to use it in the case of severe weather. So on the Village of Campton Hills website, it says, residents of the Village of Campton Hills wish to maintain the semi-rural quality of their environment and its associated lifestyle. They wish to control their own destiny, act so that property values increase over time at a rate greater than market averages, and ensure the continued excellence of schools that educate their children. This speaks exactly to what we are doing. I am a Campton Hills resident who would like to maintain our semi-rural quality of life. I do wish to control my own destiny and ensure the excellence of schools that educate our children. I'm going to flip through some of these slides. So the property, as many of you know, is on Campton Hills Road. This just gives you an overview of where it is located, about halfway between Anderson and Town Hall. We have several accessory buildings, 1 2-story frame house. The fence encloses approximately 2/3 of the property. There'll be a plat survey here, I think, in the next slide. The frontage of the property is 305 feet, and then the extension from Campton Hills Road is 720 feet. This sort of shows you where it's situated relative to the neighbors' homes and what direction those are. So those are distances to the principal structure on the property. So this is looking as you enter the drive off to the, you can see the house in the front. There is a split off into the accessory buildings, the barns, and that is, the fence goes in front of that and then all the way around the property. You can't see. Next slide. Okay, this. We did add a semicircle onto the driveway. So from here, this is on the drive looking north towards residents. And this is a view looking north of that half loop drive. Looking south along the east property line, and then looking northeast in the front yard towards the schoolhouse. You can't actually see the house because it is behind those trees. This is headed north up the driveway towards the residence. You can see the garage is at the top. And this is looking south from the residence towards Campton Hills Road. To the west, from the front yard to the neighboring property. And then looking northwest. This is on the front property looking to the northwest. That's the barn on the property. So our current enrollment is at 18. We will cap at 25 for this year, but our ultimate cap for subsequent years, we are capping at 45. Right now, we have 2 hired teachers. We have a part-time administrator, so if we expand, we'll be able to grow that to have full coverage. We are aiming for a staff of 6. There are 3 board members that are very active in this also. Our hours of operation are 8 to 5, so teachers have time to prep before or after school, and the classroom hours are 9 to 3:15, so regular school day. So as far as on the property, there is a number of different styles of fencing that, and barriers that run the length of the property. Chain link and landscaping run on the eastern side, separating the backyard from farm view. The southeastern property does have a locking iron gate that you see there in that corner. And the southwestern side is vinyl enclosure fencing with a gated entry that can be locked. Western and northwest fence lines feature powder coated metal ag fencing, in addition to about 10 foot of natural barriers, trees and thicket. So we've discussed traffic considerations, and I know that some of this is available for you in the packet, but the drop-off would be starting at 8:45. We would be available at 8:40 for anybody arriving early, and end at 9 a.m. And then pickup would start at 3:15 and run until 3:30. So my experience with drop-off like this, that families have different styles. Some like to arrive at 3:15 on the dot, others would prefer to wait till 3:29 to pick up, so it doesn't all queue at the same time. We are instructing parents annually through our parent handbook on our expectations of procedures. Whoops. I just lost you there. Okay. Per the police chief's recommendations, we can and will install signage communicating driveway use or movement limitations based on conditions. And then, like I said, we will ensure that this is in the annual handbook that parents sign off on. We consulted a traffic engineer who made recommendations that we are, of changes we are willing to make to better manage traffic flow. The existing driveway should be widened to 20 feet at the top end of the driveway near Campton Hills. There's another spot where the northerly edge of the driveway loop is also to be widened. And then bushes and trees along the north side of Campton Hills Road that would limit view can be removed or trimmed for better line of sight. And then at the access to the drive, the radii would be increased for better turning. During afternoon pickup, we can stack cars in both the inbound and the exit side, and we can fit 13 to 14 cars that way. Students would be divided into 2 groups for a staggered pickup, 15 to 20 minutes apart, based on families and carpooling. Parents will be informed not to arrive earlier than their designated time for the staggered pickup. If necessary, we can also do that with the morning drop-off. And parents will be encouraged to turn right onto Campton Hills Road when exiting the site, just for traffic. So I'm going to hand it over to Hal.
Thank you, Sarah. As I said, I'd like to run through, obviously there were a lot of public comments. We're not going to respond, I'm not going to respond to all of them, but I selected a few that I thought would be helpful to respond to. And again, these are really, this is just a abbreviated version of, what's in your head. Excuse me. Hey. Okay, so the first public comment of substantial was it was noted by a number of speakers, was that the school itself is just an inappropriate use of the property. As you know, the property is zoned in the R2 residential zoning district, as we said at the hearing and in our letter. And as you know, the schools, elementary and secondary schools, are considered and identified as authorized special uses. They're not a permitted use, but they are an authorized special use. And as we noted in the prior public hearing, the law is pretty clear that when a municipality identifies a particular use as an authorized special use in a particular district, it has already made the local legislative determination that the use is not inconsistent with the public's health, safety, morals, or welfare, and that the use is not out of harmony with the municipality's general zoning plan. And then I have the case, this is Illinois Supreme Court case from 2001, City of Chicago Heights versus Living Word Outreach Church. This case involved a church that wanted to locate on a busy 4-lane highway, Lincoln Highway, in Chicago Heights. The city had designated it, had zoned it B2 commercial, and in their comprehensive plan, they said, you know, this is an area we clearly want to develop as a commercial corridor. The church came in, and just like we are doing this evening, the church came in and applied for a special use permit. The zoning board, based on the comprehensive plan and the village's goal to have this area developed with commercial uses, recommended the denial of the special use permit. Then it went to the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission recommended denial of the special use permit. Then it went to the City Council, and the City Council denied the special use permit. The matter ended up in court, and the Illinois Supreme Court said, when it comes to land use, if you've identified the use as an authorized special use in a particular zoning district, the legislative determination has already been made that it's an appropriate use for that district. Now, I haven't put this in this presentation this evening, but as I said in my letter, that doesn't mean every request that comes before you for a special use that's been listed has to be approved. But that is why I went into better detail in my letter. You still have to prove up the standards that are in for the particular use and the particular location, that are the standards that are provided for in your zoning ordinance. So we did that at the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing, and I did it in my letter, but I'm not doing it here. The second major comment that I thought it would be helpful to address was the comment that was made again by more than one individual that the public safety and health and welfare could be jeopardized by having students in such close proximity to bridle paths or horse properties. So one of the things we've done since the close of that public hearing is we shared with you information that there are actually no recorded bridle paths from the recorded plat of subdivision. There are two relevant plats of subdivision. I have larger copies that I could pass out to you, hard copies if you'd like to see them. There's the original Campton Hills Farm subdivision from 1972. And then there was the subsequent, I think in the 90s, Country View Estates subdivision. And neither one of those plats of subdivision or in any separate document created bridle path easements, which is what I've summarized here. Now, Mr. Korth and Mr. Fortkamp got up. They are immediately to the west of the subject property. They noted that they have that there are bridle paths there on their property and that they ride, or at least one of them rides, Mr. Fortkamp and perhaps his family. But those are not on recorded easements, but that we're acknowledging that there are bridle paths there. There are horse uses there, and that is encouraged, in fact, by the village. But again, what I've cited here is another case that talks about generalized and speculative fears not being an appropriate basis for saying no to a request for a special use. And I cited this case. This is an appellate court case, the Village of Riverwood versus the Village of Buffalo Grove. I don't know if you're familiar with the intersection of Milwaukee Avenue and Lake Cook Road, but this is an area where back, as you can see, back in the 80s, a developer proposed the construction of 2 office towers on the northeast corner of Lake Cook Road and Milwaukee Avenue in this case. And the Village of Riverwoods, which is a small community to the east of Buffalo Grove, took the position that putting this much traffic, putting all these users into, I think there are 8 or 10 story buildings with a big parking deck, it would put an undue burden on the Village of Riverwoods. It would tax their police services, and the village actually sued the other village to stop the development from going forward. And in a nutshell, what the appellate court concluded were these fears and these theories that it was going to cost the village more money and put the village out of business because of the construction of these 2 big office towers. The court said, that didn't cut it as a basis for invalidating the decision of Buffalo Grove, and it concluded that generalized and speculative fears, are not an appropriate basis for saying no to a request for a special use. So that's why, what we've said here is, we appreciate the concerns of the neighbors. We think there are ways to deal with those concerns through appropriately established and enforced conditions, but we don't think those generalized and speculative fears that students may wander onto these bridle paths and spook horses or get lost in the bush or hide in the bush, we don't think those speculative fears are an appropriate basis for saying no. In a similar vein is Mr. Port's comment, again, immediately to the west of the property, that he has a burn, that he has a prairie on his property that he's burned annually for 27 years, which we appreciate that. And we appreciate his concern that by putting a school next door, that it could create challenges and issues for him. Again, in the same vein, we appreciate those concerns. We think those concerns, as we provided in our proposed list of conditions of approval, could be addressed by the village board. Finally, you also heard from Mr. Korth detailed information about the ecology and the environment and the questions about the adequacy of the septic system and its ability to serve a school use as has been proposed. This too, we believe, we again appreciate the concern. We think that could be addressed as a condition of approval, and having the village and King County being satisfied that the septic system is in good condition and can handle what's being proposed there, and if not, that it'll be upgraded and that it can all be analyzed before any building permits are issued to improve the principal structure on the property. So again, I'm not going to run through all these, I'll summarize them. These are all basically what was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission as potential conditions of approval. Obviously, compliance with applicable law district, that if this proceeds, the structure will need to be sprinklered, which is not a problem. It came up at the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing that the applicant will have to take into account satisfying the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which obviously, again, is not a problem, it's the law. You heard Sarah talk about the cap on enrollment long-term. I know that she would also be open to, as we have in here the concept of a look back for traffic, because traffic's been an identified concern. We proposed back at the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing that there'll be a look back after a year or something of operation. The village would have the ability to look back and see if some additional conditions or need to be established or improvements need to be made to address traffic. I would say it's not written up here, but I know that Sarah would be open to a similar look back on the issue of enrollment. In other words, as she indicated to you, the goal is to get to 25 students in its initial first full year of enrollment. I don't think she'd have any problem with a look back on that. Before the school is allowed to go to an increased level of enrollment, the school would have to come back to you and get comfort, make sure you're comfortable that operating with 25 students has not created a problem for the community at large or for the neighbors. One of the things that came up early on was a concern about the use of the principal structure in the school for after-hours events. We presented this at the public hearing, that there'd be limitations on that. Same thing with after-hours events, and an agreement not to rent the school out to third parties for like weddings or fundraisers. Item number 5, again, is what I was referring to. This is a new condition. This was not presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission. This would be a condition that before any building permits were issued, that there'd have to be a professional evaluation made of the septic system, and appropriate determinations would have to be made that there'd be no adverse impact on the local ecology or the environment. The village would have the right to hire their own consultant at Headwaters' expense, and obviously nothing could proceed unless all permits were obtained from the county departments. You heard Sarah run through the traffic engineer recommendations. Obviously, those would be conditions of approval This we already shared with the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing. Number 7 is the look back on traffic that I just mentioned. Then number 8 is a newly added condition. We've suggested that you could add a condition that we would, the Headwaters would let all neighbors know when a burn is taking place, and to stay inside if necessary, and to stay away if and assuming that Mr. Korth gave notice to the school that he was going to undertake that burn, and they would, obviously, Headwaters would then do everything to keep their students, indoors and away from the burn. The other 2 conditions here were previously presented. If, Sarah showed you all this landscaping and dense landscaping and fencing that's on the property, but we said back at the public hearing that if the village later on, again, on a look back, wanted to say you've got to put up more fencing or change the fencing, that would be acceptable too. And then finally, one or more individuals asked about, or I think it was actually members of the commission asked about enforcement of these conditions and the special use. And so obviously you could provide, the special use ordinance, if it were approved, would be basically part of your zoning ordinance. And so any violation of it would be considered a violation of your zoning ordinances, and I'm sure you know, your code already has a provision for per diem penalties. Every day you're in violation of the zoning ordinance, or in this case it would be the special use ordinance, would be a fineable condition. And you could also obviously put in, and it's very common to put this in, approved special use permits or ordinances, that the applicant has to reimburse the village, obviously, for all costs and enforcement. Your ordinance says that if there are conditions of approval appended to an approved special use, that everything has to be satisfied, and you got to open the special use for business, so to speak, or for operation within 1 year of the date of the approval. So there are a lot of things that Headwaters would have to resolve, with the county, with the village, with architects, with the fire protection district. The fire protection district has raised other issues we're going to have to deal with. So everything would have to be resolved, and the school would have to open its operations in this location within 1 year of approval, or the special use would die. So even if you approve the special use, there are, 10 or conditions or whatever, 8 or that could result in the school never even opening operation. So that is our presentation. If you will permit me, I would like to quickly run through. Well, you don't want to move yet, the show's not over. If I could, I want to run through a part 2, as I said here, to address something that came up repeatedly at the public hearing, and it was raised both by neighbors, residents, members of the public, and by members of the commission. And that is the issue of the existing declaration of covenants that came up repeatedly, and its interface with your zoning ordinance. Again, this is not the entire Campton Hills Farm subdivision, but it's the relevant part of the Campton Hills Farm subdivision. The bridle paths around this are in yellow. This is lots 9 through 16 of the original subdivision. There's a second page that's lots 1 through 8, but I don't have it here because it's really not relevant to our discussion. This is the other subdivision. So this is lots 15 and 16. You can see those are the 2 big lots to my right there. They got re-subdivided to create the Country View Estates. So what you're looking at there, lot 13 is actually where Sarah and her husband live. Lot 12, I believe, is where the Korths live, and lot 11 is where the Fort Camps live. Here, just to put this in context, again, here is that part of the Campton Hills Farm subdivision, and now you have an aerial that shows you, again, the Country View Estates subdivision, and you can see the subject property. The subject property is basically the western half of what you see over there under the word unofficial, that's lot 14. And the subject property, what we're talking about tonight, is that western half of that. Now, here are the provisions in the declaration that have been the topic of a lot of discussion. In paragraph 1, these covenants and these restrictions go back to 1972, so they're pretty old. But they have what we lawyers call an evergreen provision. They renew automatically like every 10 years. The first one, the restriction that's been of some discussion, is paragraph 1 says no tract nor any structure located thereon shall be used for any business or commercial purpose except farming, or in such manner as to cause noxious odors or create an annoyance or a nuisance. The other relevant restriction is in paragraph 11A. It says no structure whatsoever except structures pertinent to a farming use shall be erected, placed, or permitted on any tract except one private residence to be used only for occupancy as a dwelling by one family, only with the necessary or customary outbuildings pertinent thereto, including a swimming pool and a private stable for horses and sheep, and such stable shall conform to the architecture of the residence to which it is appurtenant, and shall have a covered manure pit. Just for the record, I don't think paragraph 1 really creates an impediment to the Headwaters Academy, because while neighbors may view this as a business or commercial purpose, it is a not-for-profit corporation. It is not a business. It is no different than a lot of music institutes and other operations and churches and schools that raise money, make money, but all the money they make, the IRS considers it not a business. Why? Because they all go into furthering the not-for-profit purpose of the corporation. So personally, I will tell you, I don't think paragraph 1 stands as an impediment to the establishment or the operation of the school on this property. The second one, I will acknowledge, is a little bit more challenging, because it says every structure shall only be used for occupancy as a dwelling by one family only. I'll note, however, it's important to keep in mind these restrictions that we're talking about encumber all 16 of those lots. The ones to the west that I showed you, 9 through 16, and lots 1 through 8, which I didn't show you. Okay, here's your zoning ordinance. And again, this was the subject of a lot of discussion at the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing. Your ordinance provides that this title, meaning the zoning ordinance, does not nullify any annexation agreement I highlighted, private agreement, or any other recorded covenants or restrictions on the land. Those private agreements, rules, and covenants may be more restrictive than this title, but not less restrictive. Otherwise, the zoning ordinance, this title controls. And it was noted repeatedly that the village is not charged with enforcing the private covenants. So the point of this is, if there's a private covenant and it's more restrictive, the private covenant controls. If your zoning ordinance is more restrictive than the covenant, your zoning ordinance controls. So now I want to just get into real quickly, what does your zoning ordinance provide? So we've said, we know that this property is in the R2 district. These are not exhaustive listed, an exhaustive set of lists. These are just the ones relevant for tonight. What are permitted uses in the R2 district? Obviously, single-family dwelling units, community gardens, which you heard Sarah talk about, and farm stands. Those are permitted uses. You don't have to come before the village to get a special use to establish those uses on the property. What are authorized special uses? Alternate education services and elementary and other schools, which is why we're before you this evening. What are not permitted uses? Neither permitted uses nor authorized special uses, agricultural support services, crop or animal production, equine boarding facility, which means people can have horses on their properties in this subdivision, but under your zoning ordinance, and again, the declaration says you can have horses, but your zoning ordinance says you can have horses, but you can't be boarding other people's horses on your property. So the zoning ordinance is more restrictive and it governs. And you can't have a greenhouse or a nursery on the property, except as you'll see, within the context of a community garden. Here are the definitions of that. A greenhouse or nursery is an establishment where flowers, shrubbery, vegetables, trees, other horticultural and floricultural products are propagated and sold, and that's the key. It says and sold, which is why it's not a permitted or a authorized special use in the R2 district. But it may include gardening, landscape supplies, et cetera, et cetera. A community garden is defined as the cultivation of fruits, flowers, vegetables, ornamental plants by more than one person or family. Community gardens do not include the raising of livestock or the use of heavy machinery. Now, your ordinance, the zoning ordinance, also has some special provisions that relate to community gardens. Community gardens are limited to the cultivation of herbs, fruits, flowers, vegetables, including the cultivation and tillage of soil and the production, cultivation, growing, and harvesting of any agricultural, floricultural, or horticultural commodity. May also include community gathering spaces for active or passive recreation, but playground equipment is prohibited. Greenhouses, like I said before, in a community garden you can have greenhouses. They're permitted to extend the growing season, and accessory structures such as sheds, gazebos, and pergolas are also permitted. Now your ordinance, your zoning ordinance also says that, and I didn't put this in the PowerPoint because your zoning ordinance provisions on home-based businesses in other municipalities, they're called home occupations. It goes on for like a page and a half, and I have those. I printed them, and I can hand those out to you, and I have enough copies for everybody in the audience too. Your zoning ordinance allows for home-based businesses in the R2 district, which is very common in most communities, obviously. But again, keep in mind that the declaration says no tract or structure located thereon shall be used for any business or commercial purpose. So this is where it turns both ways, if you will. Even though your zoning ordinance allows people in this big subdivision to have home occupations or home businesses, the declaration does not. I think this is the last one. Yeah, finally, your ordinance does allow in the R2 district animals besides horses. Horses obviously have a whole bunch of conditions why there's a reference to another section there. But in the R2 district, a home can have chickens, roosters, and other barnyard animals. That concludes our presentation. I appreciate you letting me run through all that, and we're obviously available to answer any questions that you have or that the public may have.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Anybody have questions for Mr. Frank? Anybody on the board? Okay.
So, when did Ms. Elliott's, is it her parents?
Her
that
parents
purchased
own the property.
When did they close on the property?
A year and a half ago?
October 31st, 2024.
And then, when did the neighbors become aware that a school was proposed on the property?
May
Of 2025.
of 2025.
And when did it first come to the village's attention, that you were seeking some sort of a special use permit?
June, I would have to check email records to confirm, but I think it
So-
was May or June.
What is the reason for that delay? Because I think that's a pretty big concern that I have, is I wonder what is the reason for the delay? Because it seems to me, from what I've seen, so much took place during that time.
Yes.
You know, there was advertising, there was, I believe, a open house, there was students being signed up, there were teachers being hired, all these things. Why not come to us first? Why not come to us when the property was up for sale to say,
I'm happy to answer.
this, you know, is this a possibility? Is this something that we can do? Why wait so long? Because that is very
Because at
concerning.
the time, when we were researching, on the Campton Hills webpage, under the zoning ordinance, the first zoning ordinance that was listed
had RE2 schools were permitted with no special use. So when I first started, there was no, from confirming the property zoning and from reading the zoning ordinance on the internet provided by the Village of Campton Hills, there was no requirement. The zoning ordinance passed December 3rd. That old zoning ordinance finally got pulled down, and then we were required. I wasn't aware when it passed on December 3rd that it was then a requirement. I was made aware by Jim when he contacted me.
Okay, so you were under the impression when you were going through the purchase process that there would be absolutely no reason to go and seek any kind of zoning permission whatsoever on $1 million property to get, to see if there was any requirements?
I did reach out to Jim and confirmed the zoning and confirmed what it was zoned. And then I read your zoning ordinance that said it was a permitted activity.
So did you seek a permit?
No, you don't need a permit.
So
It-
in your
it
opinion, it
required-
didn't require anything?
It didn't.
That's all, at all?
Correct.
Under the zoning ordinance then in effect.
Yes,
Okay, so at the point when you realized,
yeah. My parents were going to move in, to be clear. They had every
that was
intention of
another
moving in.
question.
Yep.
So originally they were going to move in, so what changed their mind? Why did they decide not to?
My dad's health.
Okay. And so at what point were you made aware then that the zoning had changed, that zoning had, because I guess I'm
When
not
Jim Brown
familiar with.
emailed me in May, I found out that I needed to, he explained the process to me. He explained what the current zoning said and what we were required to do. And I literally took action immediately to do the process he explained to me, which was apply for a variance, go into special use, apply for special use, go in front of the zoning, like the process we are currently going through.
So I'm not familiar, is anyone else familiar with, did the old zoning seriously allow someone to do to put a school into a residential area without requiring anything else?
I can answer.
Yeah.
So, the ordinance that the village adopted for Kane County, it's Kane County's ordinance, we adopted, had schools as a permitted use. The village adopted an ordinance in January 2023. Schools were listed as a special use in residential zones in that ordinance. Both of those ordinances were up on our website at the time. So, Ms. Elliott, what she said, not doubting the veracity of what she said, but the 2023 ordinance, which was passed in January, had schools as a special use.
In 2023. So it sounds to me like there would have been a requirement for her to seek a special use permit. Correct? Is this a
Yeah.
misunderstanding? Okay, so I'm not clear on this, that you were able to go ahead and start this school with no other requirements whatsoever. I'm not aware, it sounds to me like, I know we had the King County sort of rules in place, and I know we had another ordinance passed, and then we had another revision done, this in 2025, but I'd have to see this for myself, I'm confused by that.
But if I understand correctly, Mrs. Brown, did you not say that both ordinances were on your website?
They were, yeah.
So, I don't,
I clicked on the one on top, the very first one listed.
so the Kane County zoning ordinance, which identified it as a permitted use in a residential district, was on your website. So was your other one.
And is that the standard we are held to? That if
No, but it's
something
just
is
explaining,
inappropriately left on a website?
it's answering your question as to why would somebody proceed thinking they don't need a special use permit and start advertising and doing all these things. Why would they do that? Why? Because on your website, there was an ordinance that said it's permitted.
But the
It's a huge-
2023 ordinance was effective
Correct.
and enforced at that point in time.
Correct.
There's no dispute.
No dispute about that. That's what Mr. Brown said. But he said, unfortunately, both of them were on your website. So it's possible someone like Sarah could click on one and think that's the answer. She
This
didn't
is
even
a-
know it would be helpful to hire an attorney.
It's a huge investment. It's also something that, I don't know, it just seems to me, I don't quite understand the delay. And I think I see what you're saying, but I still have a hard time understanding that.
Okay.
It's a huge investment, you're going into a community with a situation that obviously now has turned into a very contentious situation, and it seems to me that that might have been avoided had some of this been handled differently, so I have a concern about that and maybe not taking better steps here, because it makes me concerned about the future and whether or not you will, take the ordinances and the rules seriously. I'm just gonna be honest about that.
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions for Mr. Frank? Oh, Nick, go ahead.
Are we opening this up to questions for Sarah just generally, or do we want to finish public comment? Because I've got a list of questions. Are we doing that now? Or are we progressing through public?
Yeah.
Okay. I had some questions for you, Sarah.
Sure.
I was curious about the certifications for the school. At the end of 8th grade, are you going to be issuing diplomas to the students?
We are working on getting accredited with ISB. It takes a multiple year process, so I don't know if year one we can officially issue a diploma for 8th grade, but that is the trajectory.
Okay, so the Illinois Department of Education is
It's
not.
Illinois State Board of Education, ISB, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Illinois State Board of Education is the authority, yes. And they're aware of our, we've already reached out to them to get started in the process, but this has come first.
Okay. Parking, I've seen the driveway and the auxiliary paved areas in front of the barn. Typically can you just walk me through how you're going to organize parking? Because potentially your engineer talked about a study that your driveway could handle 15 vehicles. It looks like there could be 6 faculty, 3 every day, but then don't you have music, art, and some faculty that would be coming in and out?
Yes.
Administration board.
There's room to park, and for accessible parking would go in front of the garage. There are 3 spaces there. We would ask teachers to leave those open. Obviously, if one is accessible, no one's parking there unless they have a handicap placard. There's, that space behind would be parking for staff and teachers. There's a gate that you would need to drive, the little drive, and then park on the blacktop. We don't have it labeled into parking spaces, but it can definitely fit 6 cars, if not 9.
Okay. And as far as the flow of traffic that engineer studied, when I was looking at it, it seems like 15 cars, like stacked, parked, all not moving, could fit in there. How, that's what it looked like to me.
Yeah.
How do 15 cars
So
circulate
I think-
through there?
I think that would be it for not drop off, but pickup was as parents arrived, they would do almost the whole loop. And then students would be walked across the yard to start getting into cars that are already pulled forward, so that that first student's family can leave as soon as that gets there, and then things start moving forward.
Okay, so it's gonna be a ballet. I mean, you gotta kind of really make it.
Yeah,
And what are you thinking with 40 students, 45?
Well-
What's the vehicle count for 45 students?
Right now, with 18 students, it's something around 10 actual cars between siblings and carpooling. So if I'm doubling it, that would be around 20 cars for 30, not, what am I, 18 and 18? 36 students. And then if we're adding 10 more students, that puts us at about 25 cars. So I understand we can't stack 25 cars. But that's where we had offered a staggered pickup time or a staggered drop-off time. So as, if all students are let out at 3:15 and everyone comes then, I can see what you're saying. You would stack up all those cars Though they have until 3:30 to get there, and I know not all parents will arrive at 3:15, speaking from experience. But if we have a grade breakdown where it's middle grades are getting picked up at 3:15 and elementary grades are getting picked up at 3:30, that would also divide the groups in half. Minus we would work out those sibling, families that have one in each to find the right time for them. But we would divide it so it was half and half, came in staggered.
And if I can just add, that's why we suggested we would come back to you to make sure everything's working properly before going above 25.
Yes, I'll look back.
Is the enrollment gonna be open to children with disabilities?
We have a number of kids with documented disabilities already enrolled.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the building and the entrance, parking, entrance, egress,
The
facilities?
ADA compliance?
Yeah,
I currently don't have any wheelchair users enrolled, I have other types of disabled children. Our ability to accommodate, like, we have to meet requirements, that's like another hurdle to tackle, like, and we will be in full compliance of ADA before we would open. I haven't had time yet for our build out of a plan, because this is taking priority.
sure. And then fire district approval?
Yep, we've been in contact with them since December. We've had them out several times to assess and tell us what we need. It's been a little bit of a moving target, for what they, first told us we would need, and then what they have come back and said we'll need, but we will do whatever compliance steps, including installing sprinklers and all the appropriate signage. We have a company already, that we have a bid from, so
Do they give you any sort of occupancy limitations?
they did
on
already
it?
give us some. I would have to look before I spoke. It's like, it's wildly higher than the numbers we're talking about. And that would not be it's like this room is occupancy for 75 people,
Got it.
so.
Can you talk about the 12 fundraisers?
Oh, it's not 12 fundraisers.
Did that
It'd be
change
like,
on the update?
it would be like fundraisers, back to school night, parent education nights, student performance nights. We want to be able to host those types of events after school hours throughout the school year. So I estimated one per month was probably what would fit us well, and
Yeah.
also hopefully work with what the needs here are.
So those being outdoors in the evenings could definitely impact the neighbors. What do these events kind of look like? Are they indoors, are they
I don't think-
outdoors?
I mean, having lived in that neighborhood for as long as I have, I don't think it's gonna be a negative impact of volume. I've heard plenty of parties at night that go on till midnight, whatever, and I haven't seen it as an inconvenience. We're agreeing to stop by 10 o'clock, we're not talking about rock concerts. We're talking about being able to fundraise so that we can keep the doors open. It might be a silent raffle, it might be a dinner, a ticketed dinner. But it would be with the nature and in full compliance in anything, any of our zoning or noise ordinance, any of that.
And then I noticed on the updates, you are already saying that there won't be any third party.
No.
events.
No.
So that will occur. All right, thank you, that was all my questions.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Frank?
Yeah, I just had a question, I guess, for Attorney Frank, and maybe even for our attorney on the 1-year time frame, if it gets approved based on conditions. Does that include the issue with the covenants? If I'm speaking out of turn here, somebody could just slap me to make shut up. Does that include resolving the covenants issue with the neighborhood, the 1-year time frame?
They would be separate, but the answer is yes. In other words, not only within 1 year would the conditions have to be satisfied, fire department, et cetera, but also whatever issues arise, if they do arise over the covenants, would have to be resolved before the special use lapses. Yes.
So basically, all the issues, and I don't wanna sound negative about it, but I think the school fits the village like a glove. It's really unfortunate that it's on this property, because I think the property is challenged. But I don't think anybody would argue the point that this is a school that you'd want if it was anywhere but here, I mean, as far as the neighbors are concerned. But, you know, to me, there's a lot of challenges with the property, and I think trustee Beltner, you know, pointed some of them out. And there's only a year time frame, and we all know how legal matters drag on. So that, I guess that's a bit concerning too, that we can all be putting in an awful lot of work and have the 1 year expire and it just dies anyway.
Well, I appreciate that. I think, as you said, I think the attorneys could work out something that takes that into account, that possibility. In other words, drafting, if there was an ordinance on the table to approve the special use, there could be a provision that says, what if? You know, and a petitioner always has the right to reapproach you to extend that date. You can say no, but you can also say yes. And so is it beyond the realm of possibility that there's litigation or something over the covenants, and therefore she's not able to open within 1 year, and we come back and say, could you extend it? It's not in our control. Could you extend the 1 year period? That's possible.
Okay, we ready to move on and go to public comment. Mr. Frank, I'm gonna ask you to just move your stand up a little bit when people want to use the restroom. You're climbing under the wire, so thank you. Okay, and then I ask the public, whoever wants to speak, to please be respectful and try not to be repetitive. You know, try to talk about the issues and not be too repetitive when you come up, or the next person that comes up. Chief, did you want to say anything more?
No,
Okay.
I mean, everyone has strong opinions on this, and they're all well respected, and that's the reason everyone is here to stress, you know, what they want to say on it. Please be respectful, like, you know, just nothing insulting, nothing derogatory towards it. I completely understand it, I just don't want anything to turn personal in nature on either side, so that's all we ask.
I should just mention one thing. Just prior to tonight's meeting, the village did receive a copy of correspondence from the nearby property owners regarding written protests by the property owners. It will be distributed to the board. I just received it as I was walking in this evening, and I believe a copy will also be, or maybe already has been delivered to the applicant pursuant to Illinois Municipal Code. If a certain percentage of the adjoining property owners do file a written protest and sign a written protest, deliver it to both the applicant and the village. Any positive action on behalf of the village to approve the special use, whether with conditions or not, would require a 2/3 vote of the village board. So I just want you to have that in mind. It's not relevant for this evening's discussion because there's no action tonight, but when it does come to action, it will require 2/3 two-thirds of the village board.
Okay, we'll move on to public comment. First person want to step up to the podium? Anybody want to speak tonight? Seeing none? Anybody? Okay. Oh, no. Go ahead.
Hi.
Please state your name and your address.
Sure. I am Kazim Kutab, Kazimqutab, 1331 North 14th Street, DeKalb, 60115. I'm one of the two hired instructors. I just want to clarify, if it's any peace of mind regarding school events, I know fundraisers were mentioned, keeping us afloat. I actually just had a conversation with my colleague, the other instructor, about events throughout the year, and we're trying for the sake of families actually to keep them really during the daytime as much as possible, even within the school day, when it comes to science fairs, plays, things like that, so that kids could get picked up in a normal afternoon time. So we really are aiming, we have kids as young as 5 years old. We're not aiming for any night events when it comes to those kind of things. So the large overestimation, I think we're trying to play safe here with 12 events a year. I think that we want to take that into account, that most of this will be daytime. So.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Want to come up and say a few words, or their concerns or questions? Okay, hearing none, go ahead.
So I think, as far as further direction for myself, but also for, Mr. Brown, would be that if the village board, has any consideration for approving the special use, what, if any, conditions, would be placed on it, because, that would be helpful to have that beforehand, if the matter is here on the agenda for approval, ordinance, so, certainly if you'd like to discuss that tonight, or if you'd like to, provide that information to myself, I can give it to Mr. Brown. We just have to have that available for that village board meeting. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it would appear on an agenda, no earlier than the 16th of September. The applicant is not able to be here on the 2nd of September. So that's when it would be available. We would prepare. You have the findings of fact that have the proposed conditions that were also discussed by council for the applicant tonight. So that's a good basis for conditions that they brought forth. If you had any further, feel free.
Okay, anybody else? Any other comments? Nick, just quickly, yeah.
Sure. I would have some suggestions for a conditional approval, just to get them out there now, all together. Is this what you're asking? Let's go through them right now.
Yeah, if you have anything in addition to what the applicants provided tonight, then you can discuss it with the board tonight.
Yeah, so I think the parking, I think we need to have the parking locked down for a business like this. Striped lots, handicap accessible parking. I would like to see that as a condition, that everything is marked out, handicap spaces. We need to ensure that with 45 vehicles, one of the conditions that an engineer would verify that there can be a flow of traffic in this driveway, so that 20, whatever the vehicle count ends up being, that there's a reasonable flow of traffic and some sort of a plan to keep vehicles moving. I think that's certainly a safety hazard if all these vehicles get locked up in this circle driveway and can't get out. The ADA accessibility, if it can be part of this, it is something that it's very important. I mean, that this building be accessible to any children with disabilities, adults. Anybody who comes here needs to have access for the type of facility that they're talking about having. Full fire district approval, of course. The fundraisers, I would propose that a condition would be a total of 4 outdoor, 1 per quarter. I think that that's similar to what a residential neighborhood, I think that's similar to what a person would expect a family to potentially have. I think that this property should do its best to mimic a residential home. Another thing with this, nobody's gonna be living here, so it's a residential property, but it's not anymore. I mean, it's zoned residential, but nobody will be living here. No outdoor speakers or lighting for any evening events. Again, minimal impact on the residents. No third-party events, they've already agreed to that, so of course the entire list. I would put a condition of max 45 student enrollment. I don't know if they committed to 45 in theirs or if they anticipated 45. I would put a maximum enrollment of 45. Condition also the driveway signage, and no parking or standing ever. out on Campton Hills Road. And that would conclude the list that would make me comfortable with this potentially as a conditional approval.
Okay, thank you, Nick. All right, oh, go ahead, Janet.
I agree with all of that, and I appreciate the work that the applicant has already done to try and address some of the concerns that I think have arisen out of all of this. For me personally, 45 students is a lot, and I'm not sure what the right number is, but 45 seems like a lot, no matter what other conditions are satisfied. I also wonder, because someone asked me earlier, well, if I walk up to this, is this a public place now? If I walk up to the school, I drive up and I want to come in and see whether it's a good place for my child to go, can I do that? And I said, well, I don't know, I guess you could, but then it occurred to me, you can't actually just walk into most schools, right? So there's a security aspect that you're going to be addressing also, is that correct?
I just agree.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, it's
That would be important. Those are the only additional things I have.
Trees, go
See,
ahead.
the other issue that I didn't bring up, because I know it's been addressed, but I do want to mention it now, we are talking about sort of conditions, is the whole water situation and the Mill Creek running through the property, the underground old tiles running through the property. There would have to be I would think, some sort of significant study done on this property. I think I've seen some maps, and I am no expert in this, but I've seen maps that show that this is a very delicate area, and these are old tiles underneath this property, and so, you know, it was designed as residential, and now we're turning it into, I know, contrary to maybe what they want to call it, but it is a commercial space now with, you know I live on Well and Septic, and I could not handle 45 people using the restroom every day and day after day. And I don't have Mill Creek running through the bottom of my house. So I think that's a significant issue that needs to be seriously looked at. And, you know, not all of these properties were meant to accommodate that kind of volume, and that is a lot of volume. And so there are people who are very concerned about the age of those tiles and, you know, what might happen, and the fact that we do have Mill Creek running underneath, so.
All right, Frank, go ahead.
Yeah, I would agree with pretty much everybody's comments. The other thing I'd like to see, if we even consider going forward, is having a little bit more buffer between, you know, and I walked the property, I never really saw the bridle path. There's like some big fields back there. But I'd like to see maybe a little bit more buffer between whatever activity is gonna take place on the property and the neighbors and the horse paths and whatever else might be there. So it could be shrubbery, it could be fences, it could be whatever, but, you know, just to keep that distance and hopefully make the residents a little bit more comfortable, just have a bigger buffer area, in addition to, you know, what everybody else said, so.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Sure, Kim, go ahead.
Okay, so everybody else has pretty much got through some of the things I was gonna bring up. I'd also like to see if it were to be approved, that we go about it in such a way that the special use would not carry with the property, but the nonprofit. We don't want it to be attached forever and ever. It's always kind of a concern of mine if we do something special use like that. Again, I think, Sarah, you got a lot of things that you gotta accomplish before anybody, and not us, even can let you occupy that as a school. It's gonna be a big endeavor. So, I think the only other piece, again, I went out and took a look at the property. I would recommend maybe a buffer between up in the front yard and the property to your east, just an additional buffer there. I know that the fencing over there is locked and it's pulled, but it is fenced, but again, it seems a little open. I would even maybe have the kids play there. Lots of other space, gorgeous space too, by the way. But, so that's what I've got.
Thank you, Kim. All right, anybody else? Teresa, one more time?
Just one last thing.
Okay.
I know there's been a lot of talk too about this, there's these big buffers and there's all this, foliage between the spaces, but we're looking at it in the summer and there's a lot of leaves on this foliage, and I also went and walked the property, and I'm very curious to see what it looks like in the winter when there isn't all the foliage and it's much more open, and the majority of the time that the kids will be there, it will be without foliage in the winter, and I'm curious to see how, because now you look and there is a lot of buffer. I have the same thing at my own house where, as soon as the leaves are all gone, all of a sudden you see all your neighbors again, and so, unfortunately, I think we're gonna be making some decisions before we're able to see that, but there's a lot of things to take into consideration here for these neighbors, and I think, they deserve this consideration from us, so that we are making a good choice for them and understanding, putting ourselves in their shoes. If this was our house and we had this coming in next door, I think that I love the idea of the school, and I think it sounds like a wonderful idea, but I also, I agree with Frank that just maybe not here, maybe somewhere else, and maybe somewhere else in the community where we could find it, and just not here, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Trace. Kim, go ahead.
I guess this is a question for Jim Brown. So, we've had 2 zoning changes within 2-year period, right? The one that was changed from the one that we had in the books that kind of mimicked Kane County, which we had since 2007. That was underway for over 9 years, and it was approved on 1/24/23. So that was the prior one. It got revisited back in '24, where the new one was approved and the ad hoc zoning commission was put into place. Can you recall, because I didn't have time to look at the 2023, from 1/23, was the special use permit needed in the 2023 version before the 2024?
For a school in a residential area? Yes, that's the ordinance that was in effect prior to January 2023 listed schools as a permitted use in residential settings.
So you would
And then
confidently say,
if I'm mistaken, please correct. No, that's correct. And then we approved a new ordinance, a text of a new ordinance in January 2023. We incorporated all of the permitted and special uses into a table, which is the common way to do it now. And at that time, the classification of a school from permitted use in a residential area to special use was changed.
and that was the one.
That was January 2023.
So it would have been on the website in the fall of 2023.
Both of those ordinances were up throughout the fall of 2023, yes.
The one that was being
Or
worked
20,
on.
24, I'm sorry, get my ears confused. Yeah.
So in the fall of 2023 would have been the only one approved from 2023?
I think they're both still hanging on the
Okay.
Yeah.
county and the 23.
So the one from 2007 still hanging on there?
It was.
I don't know.
When the new zoning ordinance was approved, it was placed on the website, and prior zoning ordinances were removed.
So like the one from 2024 or the one from 2023?
When the 2024 was approved.
I just tried to get the timeline down.
When the 2024 zoning ordinance was approved, in December of 2024, the prior zoning ordinances were removed at that time.
I'll add 2 points. It's really a problem on almost any municipality's website. Documents get posted in multiple places, and then you take one down and it's still up, or links are broken, it doesn't work. That's very common. It's not unique to Camden Hills, believe me.
It's not unique to a lot of.
Right, yeah, it's, that happens, quite frequently. And also, is my second point now, it's having, I answer zoning questions, every day, several come in, so it's not untypical for someone to have difficulty, reading or understanding things. So, I hope I don't confuse them more when they talk to me. Sometimes I have trouble. So I don't think there was any effort by Ms. Elliott to deceive anyone. I think this was just really an honest mistake. I will say, there was a question that Trustee Huffensberger had. So, when I found out, I was notified by the neighbors, and I contacted, which turned out to be the applicant immediately, and I said, well, if you want to open this fall, you need to apply right now. And she must have submitted I was overseas mid-May, and I think there was an application when I got back, because the hearing was on June 18th, so there had to be an application in about 20 days prior to that, because there's letters that have to be sent out, the newspaper had to come in 15 days. So the application, I think, was waiting for me when I returned from overseas, and she did that immediately. I mean, there was no balking. And the fact is, we do have an applicant here now, and whatever happened before, why it happened, we do have an application now, and we've gone through the process. So,
Thank you, I just wanted clarification.
Frank, go
I
ahead.
said, I guess one last question for me is, Attorney Frank referenced some case law in Chicago Heights and Riverwood, Buffalo Grove, where the village was overturned, the zoning commission's recommendation was overturned. And I guess my question is to our attorney, and you don't have to answer it here, because you might have to do some homework. Based on whatever decision we make, pro or con, to the school, could you advise us on what our legal exposure might be? And again, you don't have to do it tonight, but I'd like to at least get an opinion on that.
Sure, and that's something that, if there is a threat of litigation by the applicant, then we can certainly would be subject to a discussion in closed session. But absolutely, I mean, you're following the procedures now. You've had a public hearing at the PCC. You're discussing it now. You will have the time where it would come for a vote. So you're providing due process to the applicant as to the basis for your decision. That's where the analysis would come in. So.
And for clarification, Carmen, as long as you're doing the legal review of what was filed by the objectors, the neighbors, that number is that factually correct? That it would require a 2/3 of the entire board or the trustees? Not, it'd be the president and the 7. So it'd be 2/3 of the 7 or 2/3 of the 6?
I think the number would actually still be the same, because the village president only votes to break a tie. But I think whether it's 6 or 7 or 2/3 is still gonna be the same number. Don't quote me on that, but, we'll be sure of that before it comes to a vote. As to the language of the statute that requires that vote, that is correct. I mean, I haven't fully reviewed the petition yet, the objection petition, but as to whether or not I believe it's valid, because I just received it, but it does require that vote. It's 20% of the adjacent frontage or the frontage of the property that is adjacent to the subject property. Just glancing at the objection petition, it includes, I believe, all of the properties that surround the subject property except for Ms. Elliott's property. So it's unlikely there's a question as to the 20% being that far. Sometimes you see it where it's a street and the frontage is directly on both sides of the property, but maybe not across the street. Here you have all of the property members that surround the property that sign this petition. So probably at that 20%.
So 2/3 is a greater number than if the board wished to overturn the planning and zoning commission, it would take a supermajority.
Supermajority.
To overturn
Right,
the PCC. So what's the number? 5?
5 out of 7, which still does not require the village president's vote, but the village code doesn't have a supermajority requirement. It is the local village code for any, I believe, even a variance or a special use or a text amendment. I don't believe it has that. But because there's a objection
so.
Okay, one last, question or comment, and then we'll move on.
Thank you. Therese, you made me think of something. I'm glad you did. You mentioned the winter time, and right now it feels very secluded. And I had been racking my brain on how something could be incorporated into here to provide the neighbors with some separation. But we received letters from some of the neighbors, which were all very appreciative of all of them. But one was a narrative talking about, what if they go and build a fence, a privacy fence, or put a bunch of vegetation. I love my beautiful view in the backyard. Now I'm gonna be looking at a fence or a wall of trees. It's not what I signed up for. And without something like that, I'm picturing myself in my backyard. There's a community garden right there. I'm relaxing in my private backyard, and I have 6 people I don't know working in the garden right in my backyard. I would like to hear from the applicant some sort of a proposal on how you're going to provide that seclusion to the neighbors. I don't have a good idea. The neighbors don't want to see a big privacy fence. They like their view. I think that would go a long way with everybody around them if they knew how they would be as minimally impacted as possible. Still use their backyards without having activity that they didn't sign up for, kind of right in the backyard.
All right, thanks, Nick. All right, we're gonna move on. Thank you all for being here, and know that we're receiving all your emails and letters, and whether you're for or against, and from today, it looks like September 16th is when it may come formally in front of the board for a vote. So just put that on your calendars. If it changes, just keep checking our website. We'll put it on the website. And yeah, you're free to stay if you'd like. Otherwise, we're going to move on with our agenda. They didn't want to. Yeah. Does anybody want to public speak? Yeah. I know I offered earlier. Nobody seemed to want to. Okay.
I would just say one thing.
Sure, but you have to come up to the mic. You state your name and your address.
My name is Vince Kelly. I live on 4N150 Farmview Road, so backing up to it, basically, Campton Hills Farm subdivision. I know, again, this is a very heated topic. I'm not going to waste your time going through all this stuff. I would just ask you really read all the emails that everybody's sending me. Take into consideration how the neighbors feel. There's not one neighbor in the subdivision that wants this, because we all purchased there knowing this should never be an issue. So that's important to us. And then I would just like to clarify, she purchased the home in October 2024. So you're saying the ordinance was removed when the 2024 was up. So I don't see how she possibly could have even read the wrong ordinance. So, thank you.
Be careful how you respond.
Can I just show you this? This is actually the board of, I'm sorry. Okay, quickly. I'm Dee McDuffie, and I live at 4N156 Country View Lane. This board shows all the no's in our area. It's depicted in red. So this is Campton Hills Farm. So it's Country View, Farm View, the middle's on Campton Hills Road, and further down Campton Hills Road. The only properties that are yeses would be Sarah Elliott's property, and of course the proposed Montessori School property. So I just wanted you to get a visual of the surrounding properties and what all the neighbors probably feel.
Okay, thank you.
And just for the board's perspective, when this does come to a vote, we'll have, potentially even have an updated staff memo, but you may have something going for me regarding the petition that was filed and the legal requirements, and then based on my review of the petition, whether or not we believe it is valid. And I didn't misspeak, it's 2/3 of the alderpersons or trustees currently holding office He doesn't vote unless to break a tie, but I'll make sure that we have the voting totals correct for that evening when it comes up to, or the voting requirements for our vote.
Okay, nobody else wants to speak up? We got one more. Okay. Yes, I'll move on.
My name is Dan Forth, I live at 4N057 Country View Lane. You've seen my report I put together on the headwaters, on the Mill Creek headwaters area, about the aquifer being right below. I just wanted to make a quick comment. I'm using Mr. Frank's letter that he attached to the agenda. And last meeting, Dana Merck had mentioned about the water usage, and she estimated that 82 gallons per person, which is on the low end of a family, in the normal family. Well, even if you cut that in half, say 41 gallons per person for 50 people, 40, kids and students and adults, that's still 2,000 gallons of water every day going into the system, okay? And right into Mill Creek. The other thing I wanted to bring up was there was some confusion about the bridle path. Well, back of my property, which backs up to that, horses have ridden back there. The Fort Camp children have ridden their horses back there, as long as they've been able to ride. So there's no question that that area is equestrian. They are competent riders and responsible. I let them ride back there anytime they want. The other thing I wanted to state quickly was about my prairie. I have a prairie patch back there that I've been tending for 27 years or more. I have prescribed burns there every year. It's not purported, it actually happens. And anyway, there's a sentence in here that Mr. Frank wrote. It says, Mr. Korth's fears and concerns can be easily addressed by having him commit to also giving the school notice of his intent to conduct a burn. What does that mean? Having him commit. Is someone going to force me to do that? Is that, am I supposed to rely, do I have to take on all that liability to notify additional people now that I'm going to be burning a prairie back there? And what are they going to say when I do? I mean, just recently, I've been walking back in my prairie, just walking on my prairie, and I've had the police called on me twice. By Headwaters people, just for walking back there. They have surveillance cameras back there watching my backyard. So how am I supposed to take from that? Having him commit. What am I supposed to do with that? That's all I got to say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gordon. Okay, we are going to move on the agenda. And again, thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you all very much. Sorry.
Thank you all.
There's still 3 more things on the agenda, Mike. Oh, well. The little old lady called you a lying bitch right on camera. Some little, what a lying bitch, she said. Have fun in validating the 2023
Okay, we'll move
ordinance.
on to discussion item